Previously in Uncommon, Book 1 in the Chronicles of the Common series, Eva and Izzy survived their harrowing encounter with the hellhound only to be confronted by a brand new threat. And now, Chapter 10, LUHCEAN. I found myself in the very last place I expected to be today, in the middle of a Naraki forest inside the Vatas terminal. My shock was cut short with the smell of fresh blood and the sudden scent of surprise and fear. My brother's fear. I ran. "Where are you?" I mentally shouted to Kai. "Not far, but you might want to slow down," Kai replied. "Why?" I asked, then burst through a row of bushes and came to a sliding halt. "That's why." Kai pointed to the lovely backside of a witch. Upon further inspection, I realized it probably wasn't the witch's ass causing my brother's spike in fear, but rather the Clued hovering protectively near the witch's side. The very large hound growled through blood-stained fangs. His focus narrowed on Kai, then quickly swung to me. Having retrieved her blaster in our moment of shock, the woman slowly stood and turned to face us. The breath punched from my lungs. My jaw hung and my cock instantly sprung to life. It was her. The woman from my dream was standing less than a handful of meters away. I would never forget that face, those eyes, her scent, which was entirely wrong. I inhaled deeply, trying to sort out what was amiss, but drew in a normal Matrian Fey Hada concoction. That wasn't entirely true. It smelled off. Chemical, manufactured. Her scent might be fake, but it was her, the girl from the White Room. What the hell is Agby playing at? I pondered. The old crone had dropped us right in each other's laps. She had to have a reason. Nothing in the common happened this coincidentally. "Agby? What does Agby have to do with this?" Kai asked, responding to my mental musings, and I realized my shields had completely fallen. I shored up my mental shields, hoping my brother didn't catch any more than the single thought. Standing in front of a drooling Clued was not the time for brotherly teasing about dream girls. "Hi," she said, then laid a hand on the head of the drooling beast. "Don't mind us, we're just out walking the doggy." Her voice wove around my heart, and I breathed through the urge to confront the woman about the dream. I had no idea if she remembered it, or me, but now was not the time. Focusing on the immediate issue, I watched her rub the animal behind the ears. I didn't know if I was more surprised by the attempted lie about why she was there, or her familiarity with the Clued. She gave the animal a soft pat on his head, and the beast dropped to his haunches to sit pleasantly at her side. I was definitely more surprised by the Clued. A second witch slowly walked up to stand at the woman's side. The short, dark-skinned Matri froze in place, staring wide-eyed at my brother. The woman was covered in ash, and there was a hole in the shoulder of her cloak, surrounded by fresh blood. Her wild hair was sprinkled with twigs, leaves, and if I wasn't mistaken, a tiny bat. The biting scent of shock mixed with the fetid stench of betrayal flooded the air. "One of your conquests?" I teased, nearly smacking myself for the payback I was sure to receive when he discovered my own fascination with the taller woman. "No, I would remember her," Kai replied. The petite young woman whispered to the bat nestled in her hair and proceeded to stomp her way toward us, or rather toward Kai. "Kai Taizeka, I am going to kill you!" she yelled. Then the little witch launched herself at my brother. She threw her weight into the effort, knocking him to the ground. Fisting his shirt in her tiny hands, she gloriously failed to lift and pound him into the dirt. Kai's extreme shock at his new position beneath the woman briefly left him unable to defend himself. Once he came to his senses, Kai began to push and wiggle beneath her, which only served to incite the little fireball of a witch. She proceeded to smack and shove at Kai with all her might. Not that the woman was doing any actual damage. I crossed my arms over my chest and observed with amusement. This was a fight I wholeheartedly approved. I wasn't the only one entertained with the wrestling duo on the ground. The dream girl lifted a brow and propped her free hand on a hip. She was quite tall for a Matri witch, if that was what she was. Her fey half could account for her height and the long dark brown mane falling from the loose tie at her back, but she did not have the willowy frame of a fey. Her curves and strong build were far more akin to a Keddy shifter than fey. No, she was exactly like the woman from the White Room, a perfect blend of the common species. Large brown eyes glowed from a round ivory face. She had a long, delicate nose and full lower lip, which was trapped between her teeth. 1,000 emotions crossed her beautiful face as she debated interference. The woman turned to the hound at her side and ordered the Clued to stay put. Rushing to her friend's aid, she paused with her blaster pointed in my direction and raised a brow as if asking permission. She obviously had no recognition of me. Then again, I didn't look the way I had in my dream, and I now regretted not trimming my hair. I gave her a slight nod of agreement, curious to see what she intended to do. If she chose to join the fight, who was I to deny her retribution? Whatever Kai had done to these women, he most likely deserved the punishment. Instead, she hooked her long arms around her friend's chest and dragged the struggling woman back to the waiting Clued. I found myself rather disappointed the fight was over so quickly. "What the hell is wrong with you, Izzy? We do not attack strange men, at least not unprovoked," the dream woman scolded. "Oh, I was provoked. That's him, Eva, the one I told you about. That's him." The furious little witch called Izzy struggled even harder. "Eva?" Elegant and simple. I shook my head, irritated at the distraction. The woman had a Clued at her side and a blaster pointed at me. This was not the time to lose focus. "Who? The curette player? The one who's supposed to be dead?" Eva asked. "Yes. Now let me go so I can kill him," Izzy demanded. Kai pulled himself from the dirt floor and began to dust off, then paused at their description of him. "Are you sure you don't know her?" I asked. My brother was staring intently at the little witch. "I played curette with only one person, 8748, Kai replied. "The Vatus? Do you think she knows your Vatus?" I asked. "Let's find out," he suggested. He took a step toward the women, pausing when the dream girl, Eva, pointed her weapon at him. "Have you ever wondered what the bird dreams sheltered in its nest from the storm?" Kai asked. "Huh?" Eva asked, her nose scrunched and eyes narrowed in confusion. The small witch ceased her struggles, going limp in her friend's arms. Izzy's bottom lip quivered for a mere second before she swallowed and raised her chin in a show of strength. "It dreams of home, waiting to return with wings on the wind," she replied. Kai stumbled back as if struck. "So she knows your Vatus," I stated. "No, brother. I think she is my Vatus," Kai replied in shock. "Impossible. None of them have ever left Vatus Razana," I said, equally shocked. "How?" Kai asked the woman. "None of your damn business, you mangy vampyre," the little witch yelled. Izzy's fury fired again. "Shoot him, Eva! Shoot him now! Give me the blaster, I'll shoot him!" She grabbed for the weapon only to have Eva hold it out of reach while simultaneously snatching the little witch's own blaster from her waist. Unfortunately, the move forced Eva to release her hold on the little ball of fury who took the opportunity of freedom to bolt back in Kai's direction on hands and knees. "Izzy, damn it, knock this off!" Eva scolded. Eva stepped on the small woman's cloak to halt her progress, but the angry little witch began to twist in an attempt to shrug off the garment. Eva gently shoved the woman down with a knee, then quickly dropped to straddle the crawling witch's back, pinning her to the ground. The tall dream beauty then focused her two weapons on Kai and I. "There, no one moves," she ordered. Izzy began to buck and struggle, but Eva merely bounced her weight onto the woman's back, knocking the wind out of her. Under different circumstances, the sight would have been amusing. Eva bent forward, placing her lips next to her flattened companion's ear. "You don't really want him dead," she whispered. "Be angry, be furious, but I won't let you do something you might regret later." The small witch let out an exasperated sigh and propped her chin on a fist. "Fine. Can you at least wound him or something?" The anxiety of discovering Kai had single-handedly invaded a Naraki stronghold, combined with the shock of coming face to face with not only the girl in my dreams, but also a Clued, only to be followed by an entertaining round of witch wrestling. Well, something must have snapped inside of me because the crazy witch's suggestion started to sound like a fine idea. This was not the easy little supply trip I had planned. Agby may have orchestrated this meeting, as to why I had no idea, but it was Kai who impetuously teleported here. I raised my hands and stepped forward. On that account, I think I can help, I stated, then turned to my brother and punched him in the jaw. Caught off guard, Kai stumbled back and held his chin. What was that for? Yay! The little witch pounded the ground, then clapped her hands. Do it again, Luke! Hit him again! I ordered you to stay in Geminus. Why in all the stars would you teleport here? I asked. I was told Kerr was on Atlana, Kai said. A Matri reported him in the Raka terminal, and a Kedi said he was in the Vatas terminal. I followed the Kedi lead. How did you get here? Agby sent me, after she dangled that false Kedi lead under your nose. Have you gone mad? I asked. I think they might be even crazier than you is, Eva whispered, watching Kai and me stare each other down. Now's the time to sneak off. That's the second time you've mentioned Agby, Kai huffed and rubbed his jaw. What does she have to do with this? They have a blood bond. I think they're arguing telepathically, Izzy answered. There's no point in sneaking off. These are the Hada we're looking for. It's Agby we're talking about. Who knows why that woman does anything? She wanted us here, and she wanted us to find these women, I replied, then turned my back on Kai. I wasn't entirely certain I could refrain from striking him again. As much as I wanted to have it out with Kai, we were not in safe territory for that type of confrontation. First, I needed to make sure the rest of the crew was safe. Seriously? Eva asked. They're not what I was expecting. This isn't exactly what I was expecting either, Kai grumbled under his breath. I pressed my earcom and began to pace. Lee? 30 years of peace and quiet, gone in only a few days. Granted, I may have been going a little insane toward the end, but at least I wasn't constantly on the brink of death. Kai was going to get us all killed. Who in their right mind willingly travels to a Naraki hunting forest? Had my brother taken a few moments to use that lump he calls a brain in his head, he might have realized this was a trap. He had definitely been altered by that blasted magical stasis. The old Kai would have sorted out the trap before the words had left the Kedi's mouth. I took a deep breath and expelled the unfair comparison. Our current situation was more Agby's fault than Kai's. Why would Agby send us here of all places? The old hag had to have some reason for bringing all of us together. She could have merely snapped her fingers and brought the witches to us. Instead, the evil crone had dumped us in this mess, undoubtedly for her own personal entertainment. Excuse me? Eva asked. Woman with the guns over here. What the hell are you people doing? Stand still. I eyed the beautiful witch wagging her blasters in my direction. Blasters that I suspected she was unaware were still locked in safety mode. I was fairly confident I could draw and shoot her Clued before it extracted itself from the lazy grooming session it had settled into while watching the spectacle. But there was no sense in escalating the situation. I'm contacting my crew to make sure they're safe, I told her. Yeah, no. How do I know you're not calling for backup? Stand still, Eva demanded. Luke, Ileana answered in my ear. Where are you? I stopped pacing and held up a finger to Eva in a request for patience. Did Eglin make it back to Geminus safely? Seriously? Eva snarled with incredulity. Yes, Ileana answered. He said that Agby must have sent him here. Why aren't you here? And no one can find Kai. Patron is losing his mind right now. Her voice vibrated with barely controlled concern. Eva, on the other hand, was raising an eyebrow at me and waving her blaster in warning. I'm with Kai. We're in the Vatas terminal. Take Eglin and the supplies back to the bunker as soon as you can. If we don't meet you there in 48 hours, contact Jotham, I ordered. We're going comm silent. Yes, sir. Good luck. Ileana quickly replied and ended the transmission. Done, I said to the beautiful woman. No backup. "That's good to know," came a deep male voice to the right. Two men, dressed in gray escort guard uniforms, stepped from the bushes. Kai and I both drew blasters and aimed at the new arrivals. The hound jumped to all fours and gently pushed Eva aside, standing protectively in front of her. The animal growled and snapped at the startled guards. Eva, however, took the turn of events in stride, moving the blaster in one hand to cover the guards while keeping the blaster in the other trained on Kai and me. For anyone who was not catty, she appeared the epitome of confidence and cold-blooded skill. My catty nose knew better. She was terrified. "Eva," I calmly began, "if you intend to use your blasters, then you should first take off the safety." The alert was a calculated risk, one I hoped would win her confidence and remove a weapon pointed in my direction. Her eyes grew wide before she quickly released the safety on both blasters, but did not change their divided attention. "Blasted ungrateful witch." "Thanks," she offered. "Well, that worked out well," Kai teased. "Would you like to give her our weapons next?" "Quiet," I mentally replied. For a long, tense moment, no one dared to move, except, of course, the growling hound, who craned its massive head between Kai and me and the two guards, unsure which target to watch considering its mistress was aimed at both groups. "Hey, bestie," the tiny, flattened witch whispered. "I know I'm going to regret saying this, but you need to stop pointing a blaster at Luke and Kai. We kind of need them. Aim at the bad guys in gray. Gray is bad. Very, very bad." Eva immediately swung her blaster to point at the escort guards and slowly slid off her friend to crouch behind the protection of the Clued. The little witch with the wild hair straightened her cloak, checked on the odd bat still nestled on her shoulder, and then pried one of the blasters from Eva's reluctant hand. "I'm your guard, remember?" she whispered. "Yeah, I'm starting to think you made that up," Eva dryly whispered back, rolling her eyes for emphasis. Izzy gasped in shock. "You doubt me? You could have used my backup that time you snuck into the club in Hollywood and nearly had old man fingers playing whatsy-batsy spider up your thigh." Kai and I looked at each other, surprised the women had the audacity to start an argument while facing blasters. Fortunately, their discussion had captured the attention of the Synergist guards, creating the perfect opening for Kai and me to slowly creep over to the bickering witches. "You mean itsy-bitsy spider, you loon," and I managed to extricate myself from that pedophile without anyone's help, Eva scolded. "Besides, is this really the time?" "Why wouldn't this be the time?" The little witch curled a lip and scrunched her nose. "Those guards are outnumbered, and we have the beast and the blood prince with us. Are you hungry? I'm hungry." "What's a pedophile?" I couldn't help asking as I crouched next to Eva. The lure of the conversation regarding her history was gravitational, and I found myself desperate to understand the odd details I couldn't quite make out. Eva startled at my proximity, but quickly shrugged in acceptance. "A person who likes to take sexual advantages with children." She turned to her friend and snatched the bag out of the woman's hands. "Eat later. Point the blaster at the bad guys in gray, remember?" With the realization that she had been nearly abused as a child, an unbidden growl burst from my lips. Eva's eyes grew wide and she began to back up, colliding with her friend. Izzy pushed Eva back my way. "Ignore him, he does that," the little witch said nonchalantly. "And I thought I was the unbalanced one of this group," Kai mumbled. "Everyone quiet," one of the guards shouted, the scent of annoyance pouring off him. With the obvious reminder that we weren't alone, our little mentally unstable group quieted, all but the Clued, which all four of us were unsuccessfully trying to hide behind. The animal's growls increased the more agitated the guards became, or possibly the more frightened Eva became. Her scent spiked with the acrid aroma of fear, but she lifted her chin with false bravado. "My friend is right," she shouted back. "You're outnumbered. Why don't you run along your merry way and leave us alone?" The two guards shifted from foot to foot, eyes wandering the line of trees, searching for something. That's when I noticed the sense of half a dozen Raka closing in from every direction. "Watch our backs. 6 more surrounding us," I informed my brother. Kai spun to cover our rear, unintentionally pressing his back against Eva's. The action nearly made the woman fall before she quickly recovered and followed his lead, pressing against him for support. Irritation curled my lip at the sight, but I pushed it away to focus on the immediate problem. Izzy took the cue, and the four of us were all back to back with weapons trained on the new arrivals, silently slipping through the bushes and dead trees to surround us. "You were saying?" the guard arrogantly asked. One of the new guards took a step forward, presenting himself as their leader. The black-haired Raka also wore a gray synergist uniform, outfitted with tactical gear. He was a complete blank, face and scent holding no emotion as he strolled up to Kai, obviously recognizing my brother. "We're here for the Hada women," the guard said, spitting the word Hada as if he could remove its foul taste from his mouth. "We have no quarrel with you, Taizeka. Hand them over and no one needs to get hurt." At the mention of my brother's name, the other guards began to shift and glance about wildly. Having a reputation in the common was both a blessing, in cases like this, and a curse, also, in cases such as this. With 2 untrained women out in the open, it would limit our ability to subdue the guards. It would also be easy enough for the guards to take advantage of the opportunity to make a name for themselves as the one who finally conquered the beast and the prince. This situation was quickly turning from worse to abysmal. "Is that speech universal or something?" Eva muttered. "Timeless, concise, but definitely unoriginal. I give it 3 comets, the little witch said with a giggle. "Stars, you moron! It's stars, not comets," Eva corrected with a groan. Unaffected by the women's bickering, as they continued to quietly prattle on about the man's offer, the guard patiently waited for Kai to reply. Out of the corner of my eye, I could barely make out Kai lowering his head in an all too familiar fashion. "Brother, be smart. Assess the situation and time your attack," I warned. "There's nowhere to run," the guard warned. Kai didn't respond and continued to glare at the guard. "Kriho!" "Why do you want the women?" I asked, hoping to distract the guards and draw the attention away from Kai. Eva grunted and drove her elbow into my back. I subtly lowered my hand to her calf and squeezed, hoping to convey that I had no intention of turning them over. She didn't move or startle, but she did expel a long, exasperated breath in reply. The guard shifted his attention to me but remained planted in front of Kai. "They're escaped Synergist property." "Am not," the little witch shouted. "Liar, liar, pants on a tire." Eva groaned. Kai attacked. In the blink of an eye, my impetuous brother teleported behind the lead guard and sunk his fangs into the man's neck. There was a moment of quiet as the impact of his actions registered. Then a blast landed in the guard's gut. "Take that, you liar!" the little witch shouted with glee. Chaos erupted in the small clearing. Kai dropped his prey with a grunt of dissatisfaction. A new guard teleported in behind him, and Kai spun to face his attacker. The 2 teleporters blinked in and out of sight as they fought with fists and knives around the clearing. Kai was furious and wild, but he was holding his own, only because the guard was clearly less experienced. The 2 women fired wildly at everything wearing gray. It took only a second to notice they weren't hitting anything, but the random blasts were enough to distract the guards, allowing me to easily pick them off as they dived for cover. I made a mental note to teach the women how to shoot at the earliest possible opportunity. Kriho! I shook the thought of future opportunities with the Dream Woman from my head to focus on keeping us all alive. With Kai effectively out of the fight, chasing the teleporter and dodging weapons fire, it was up to me to pick off the remaining guards. A shot fired to my left, skimming past my arm and barely missing Eva's head. I threw out an arm to shove her down behind me. The guard who had fired the shot dived for a dead tree. I returned fire, blasting the man in the chest. A quick survey of the remaining guards made me grind my teeth in frustration. We were out in the open with only a clue for shelter. The remaining guards were well sheltered. I had no choice. I needed to leave the women. "Stay behind the clue," I whispered to Eva, who was still planted on her shapely ass hiding behind me. "If you get a chance, run for cover." "Got it," Eva nodded, then she punched her friend in the arm. "Stop shooting at Chess Boy." "His name is Kai, and you spoil all my fun." The little witch stuck out her lower lip in a pout. Another blast shot overhead. I couldn't sit here any longer. Bolting for the nearest tree, I ducked and wove around wild blasts issued from the guard hiding behind it. In 2 strides, I cleared the tree and swiftly snapped the man's neck. I didn't have the time to release the anger boiling inside. The women were still exposed, which meant efficiency was the mantra of the day. A nearby tree burst into flames from a wild shot, forcing the guard using it for shelter to run from the bonfire. Tracking his run, I quickly fired, eliminating another threat. The intensity of the burning dead tree heated my skin, and the overpowering smell of sulfur clogged my nose, confusing my senses. I ran for a nearby bush to escape the distracting onslaught. Fire-suppressant ash began to rain from the rafters, and I growled at the additional frustration. While the fall of ash would hamper my efforts, it would also help obscure the women from the shooting. On an open planet, I might be pleased with the situation. However, a fire on a space station was perilous. This fight needed to end immediately, because we were about to have company and there was no telling which side the authorities would favor. Pausing to reassess the remaining guard's position, I watched weapons fire across the clearing, piercing the clouds of ash from 4 locations. On silent feet, I ran for the nearest, staying low and using the ash to hide my movement. I was nearly upon the guard hiding behind a bush when he startled and twisted to confront me, then dropped to the ground. I pulled my knife from between his eyes and wiped the dagger on my thigh. A guard hiding nearby charged, firing his blaster furiously. Diving for the ground, I released the dagger in my hand. The blaster fire abruptly ceased, and the guard collapsed to the dirt, wheezing around the dagger stuck in his throat. Without getting up, I fired at the man's head, ending his pain. Pushing into a crouch, I turned back to the clearing. I could just make out the women still pinned behind the cloud. Both of the remaining guards were firing at the women from a few meters in front of the cloud. The guards didn't seem to be aiming directly at the women, nor were they targeting the growling animal. It appeared their goal was simply to keep the women in place. Suddenly a misplaced blast clipped the hound's shoulder, and that was all it took to earn the ire of the creature. The cloud launched himself from Eva's side to attack the shooting guard. The animal leapt into the air, fangs bared and tail quills standing on point. It landed on the ground, jaws clamping onto the man's shoulder. The guard struggled beneath the animal, frantically beating his fist at the creature's side. Flames erupted over the man's arms, and he screamed in horror. The second guard scurried away from his fallen partner, who was quickly consumed in flames. The stunned guard watched the animal rip and tear the smoldering flesh from his friend. His shock abated, he began to angrily fire at the animal. "Don't you dare shoot at my doggy!" Eva screamed, firing her blaster madly at the guard. She managed to clip him in the thigh, which was enough to turn his anger on her. Before the man could lift his blaster, I shot. The guard fell onto his back with a hole through his chest. Eva expelled a deep breath and blew a strand of hair from her face. "Thanks," she said, glancing my way. The women got to their feet, curling their lips and scrunching their noses in almost identical fashion. They turned away from the sight of the animal feasting on the steaming body of the fallen guard. The little witch lifted her blaster and began to track the continuous teleporting of Kai and the remaining guard. "End your playing, brother, or the little witch is going to shoot you." "She can try," came Kai's jubilant reply. "She hasn't made a shot yet." Kai and the last guard materialized a meter from Eva's position. It took only a split second for everything to go wrong. The guard launched himself at Eva, who threw herself at Kai, and the little witch fired. Subscribe to continue listening and discover if Eva, LUHCEAN, Izzy, and Kai all managed to survive their battle with the escort guards. If you liked what you heard, the Uncommon ebook can be purchased at all major retailers for only 99 cents. Thank you for listening.